Hello, love. I have absolutely no idea where to start. Um, it's been a while since I've done a reading, and all for very good reason because there have been many changes, energies taking place. A lot of it, from what I feel and what I see, is a lot of having to do with just tapping back into yourself, each and every one of us. And that obviously involves a kind of a certain degree of time to process, to integrate certain things. But the crazy thing about what's going on right now, everything, everything from collectively energetically to awakened souls, awakening souls, their experience and what they're going through astrologically, what's going on, not just in respect to, the Earth, Mama Gaia's sort of connection in that respect to astrology, but beyond that, like cosmic, galactic astrology and what's happening. I can't believe, sometimes I'm just like, I can't believe I'm saying this again, but I feel like this is going to be the next, I don't know how many decades of just like, there's a lot going on. Energetically, there's a lot going on. And I just want to remind you that uh, this is unprecedented, right? This ascension process that we're going through is completely new. That's why it's referred to as a new earth, right? And a new age. Okay. Don't overlook that when, because that is a term that's been usurped, new age, and uh, it's oversaturated, that term, and it's been used to downgrade or become a kind of flippant way of referring to spirituality in general. Anything that's woo woo, anything. The interesting thing is that it's such a kind of, it's sort of almost at the same time a misnomer, because what is New Age when really this is a lot about remembering? This is a lot about ancient wisdom coming back after a fall of sorts, right? Having to come back around again to our origins, having to come back around again to understanding where we actually come from. Okay. So, oh, excuse me. Whew, I'm telling you. So without further ado, don't want to go off too off topic about that, but just kind of wanted to touch on that for a moment. Because if I'm feeling it, then you're probably feeling it, right? So sharing is caring. Um, I just want to, let me just fix this for a second here because it's kind of, there we go. Okay. So having said that, I'm not going to go into the details, but I had something really interesting and quite happened to me before getting ready for this reading. Um, and it's reminding me that there are a lot of big transitions taking place, big breakthroughs taking place, and things where we have to really, as awakened souls, we need to really trust ourselves. We need to really trust in what we're feeling intuitively, especially if you have done the fucking work. You need to start trusting in that. And so I'm being called to, on a personal note, I'm being called to just, it's like we're continuing to, I kind of think of the, take however this resonates, but it's like we're being asked to level up. We're being asked to take that next step, right? We're being asked to venture beyond the comfort zone. And that can be a very this is a very, this is a very process. Okay? I don't need to use a word for that. You get it. So it's like one day, I mean, bringing this down to ground a little bit. It could be one day that you're feeling very ethereal, for lack of a better way of saying it. You could be feeling very much um, tapped into your higher energy centers, right? And then you may go through a number of days, like where you're, and let me just also finish that off by saying where you're feeling like you are, nothing can phase you. You are vibrating, right? For lack of a better way of putting it, at a very high frequency. You're very up in this space. You're very coming from a place of total utter compassion, coming from a place of feeling like you are totally vibrating with being at one with everything, at peace with everything. And then the next day, you are back in the throes of shadow work, which, by the way, I'm noticing is happening very fast, very quickly for awakened souls. And I'm gonna make a mental note to come back to this when I talk about this particular phrase that came through when I was getting ready to do this in the meditation. So this is all part of the process. Please trust in this. Your awareness in this is key, okay? You being the observer, all right? I want to go back to this concept of the lemniscate and the figure eight, the symbol of infinity, because it's come up for me recently. And what I have, like, people are looking at the lemniscate. You have to be really, really freaking discerning right now with a lot of what's going on in the spiritual community and a lot of what's being, again, saturated in terms of spirituality through social media, especially through anything you might see online. Basically, there has been, people have talked about the lemniscate as being stuck in a loop, okay? Now, we have to remember that everything that we experience in this plane of existence, in this incarnation right now, here on Mama Gaia, is on a spectrum. So there's always a kind of shifting spectrum in terms of our understanding, especially when it comes to the idea of the law of polarity, okay? I will not get too off topic on that, I promise. That's a whole other discussion. But what's important to understand is that the infinity symbol, especially when you look at it in tarot, okay? This is eternity, this is infinity, this is the ultimate understanding, in a sense, of all is one and one is all kind of thing, okay? The idea that energy is, I'm actually hearing right now, energy is the new currency. That's been coming through a lot for me recently. But what's sort of connected to that is this concept of we're always connected to source, okay? And what's always been for me very powerful with the lemniscate and the infinity symbol is that the middle point where the two loops interjoin or interlock, in a sense, has always been for me the third perspective. It's been the fulcrum. It's everything that it's the key. It's awareness, okay? So the third perspective is awareness, and being at that midpoint, okay? This also goes back to balance and harmony, okay? It's actually a very kind of, yeah, it goes back, it's a very Libran thing, right? It's the kind of idea of taking yourself and putting yourself in a position where you're able to observe without getting sucked in. And that's kind of the irony, is that on the flip side, the lemniscate can also represent being stuck in a loop. But there's so much to this symbol, like meditating upon this symbol. There's so much to it in terms of how your perspective is everything. And that is why that midpoint is representative of that third perspective. So, having said that, maybe I'm also getting now maybe that, maybe that's a good idea for you to meditate on it, right? And look at it from these different perspectives, because it can be very expanding in terms of understanding, right? The entirety of our existence. And specific to what I'm talking about now with regard to the ascension process, this is about really being aware, being discerning, being aware of when these things come up in you, where are they coming from? What story is sort of the main narrative? Like, what's the running story and why these feelings are coming up? Okay. I'm going to stop there because this it ties into the reading and what I want to get into. So, let's start with the phrase, the way of the ego. I have my notes written down here, which is what I'm looking at. The way of the ego. This is what I heard coming through. The energies of Pluto are coming through, the archetype of Pluto, but especially with what's going on right now astrologically, with Pluto being in retrograde, okay? It's in retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, which is, amongst many things, but for the purpose specifically of this reading, very tied into the earth plane, very tied into the way that we're programmed, the way that we're indoctrinated, the authority figures in our lives, right, that tell us what to do. This is also representative of the nature of time, how we experience time, or indoctrinated to experience time on this earthly plane, okay, and limitations, okay? So the way of the ego, and I want you to just sit with that for a second in terms of how we have been told what the ego is, how we have been indoctrinated to understand what the ego is, and especially in spiritual circles, in certain spiritual teachings, in certain popular concepts that are out there, again, saturated around the ego. This ties into this sort of Saturnian, which is representative of Capricorn here, okay? These concepts that are kind of well established, okay, in a very sort of 3D way. Then I heard eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. Eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. One of my guides came in here as well to assist in this reading as well. And there's a lot of, what I'm getting here is there's a lot of Plutonian energy coming in here around transforming this concept, okay, with Pluto being in retrograde. I saw the Judgment card come through. In terms of the imagery here, that's ascension, okay? That's this shifting in consciousness that's taking place. There's also karmic ties or soul contracts around these kind of concepts. That's a whole other side note, but maybe that's something specific to you coming through now for that. And then with my spirit guide coming in here, he's very kind of akin to like my fey companion, and he has a very sort of, he likes to turn things on its head, for lack of a better way of putting it. Trickster-esque in his energy, okay? He's loving that I'm talking about him right now. Very fool-like energy as well, okay? So this is about really turning these concepts, really for yourself, taking time out to turn this concept of the ego being bad on its head. And we'll get to that in a second why. Then I saw the inner flame that's in with our inner fire that's within each and every one of us, okay? Our spirit. This is the inner fire, the energies of that the wands coming through the tower here, the energies of your spirit encompassing the entire body, like you're one big flame, okay? I saw this as someone sitting in meditation, okay, with legs like crossed or in lotus. And then I saw the chariot card, okay? So this is about like blazing a new path. Like I actually heard chariots of fire here, okay? Like blazing a new path. And the interesting thing about the chariot card in tarot is that it is a card that is sort of it's akin to the teenage years, right? In terms of the fool's journey and in terms of discovery, the feeling, those kind of feelings of when you were a teenager and you were you knew kind of like you hadn't, let's say, necessarily developed already these limitations in your mind, okay? Now that might be different for each and every one of us, but I just want you to think of a moment. Maybe you were a preteen, maybe you were in your early teens, right? Maybe it was your entire teenage years. It's going to be different for every single one of us, where things were just awakening within you, feelings were awakening within you. You were going through these different feelings and experiences. Remember that I'm just being reminded that the chariot card is associated with Cancer. And so this is like those just accepting how you're feeling. Like, you're going through the motions of how you're feeling and you're accepting how you're feeling, and it's like, this is just how I am. And like, you could have days where you were moody, like that's how, oh, the moody teenagers. Guess what? That's actually like a really fucking good thing, because what it means is you're feeling shit. And that is like, how do I feel about this? Processing it, like looking at it and taking that third perspective. Like, how cool is it to be able to be like a teenager again, where you are now, and being able to be like, okay, that's totally why I'm feeling that. How awesome is this? Okay. So, having said all that, part of that experience being a teenager, this is now coming to me, is about understanding your ego. And the ego isn't a bad thing. This concept in spirituality of eradicating the ego is actually very harmful to us, because it sort of wants to kind of whitewash or make spirituality something very uniform. And that's a red flag, because it's not uniform for everyone. Spirituality isn't just this one thing, it's a one size fits all model. Doesn't work that way. And what often happens, and I'm speaking specifically here to empaths especially, is when you start believing or integrating this idea of getting rid of your ego and the ego being a bad thing, you do not allow yourself to process emotions and feelings and do the shadow work a lot more quickly and integratively, right? And you also completely lose yourself. You run the risk of completely losing yourself in the process, because there was a reason why you came into this incarnation with the ego that you did. If you try to bypass the ego, you're spiritually bypassing your growth. Okay? Let's start. So this is a huge topic, and obviously I cannot get to everything and every nuance in one video, but it's going to be a topic that we will come back to, because yeah, this is it's really important that we learn to understand this, because I think too many people will judge themselves or be harsh on themselves because they're trying to eradicate an ego that is really there to serve them. Your ego is here to serve you spiritually. It's kind of like the idea of like, who's in the driver's seat? Your heart, your soul is in the driver's seat, but your ego is the passenger, let's say, next to you. And it's going to be with you, your entire life in this entire incarnation. So instead of fighting it, you may as well kind of let it be your buddy and harmonize with it. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So information and messages that want to come through now. I'm asking first through the Prism Oracle, the way of the ego. Eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. So what do these Plutonian energies want to give us? My guide coming through, asking through spirit. Any other guides, any other beings that want to come through here? Passion is at the bottom of the deck. So here's the thing. Passion is something that is associated with the ego. And in certain spiritual circles or beliefs, passions are a bad thing. Okay, let's not even get into religion. Okay, and how passion has been vilified in religion. But passion is, I'm just going to hold this up because look at the imagery on this. Okay, passion is your heart speaking to you. Whatever you are passionate about, please do not confuse passion with lust or like more kind of I don't know, base desires, for lack of a better way of putting it. I really don't know how else to say it here. Passion, this is passion coming from the heart. This is, what are you passionate about? When people ask you that question, where does your mind go right away? What are you passionate about? You understand that through the ego. You understand passion through the ego. It's interesting that that came out at the bottom of the deck. Those are the underlying energies, right? Sort of our foundation that we're working off of, okay? Then we've got movement. This always reminds me of the Eight of Wands. So this is, and the 8 coming through here again in the lemniscate, right? And awareness in that midpoint. So where does your passion take you? That is part of your journey, because that's what movement is. It's a journey, right? So your passion, where does it take you? It connects you to your heart. It takes you back into your heart, right? And then rest. And it's interesting because both of these are green, okay? Associated again with the heart center and the heart space here and the heart chakra. I don't know why I'm being prompted to say this, but green is like the easiest color on our eyes versus red. Isn't that interesting? And these aren't they complementary colors on the color wheel, right? So when you look at them against each other, they're like super, they become very vibrant, right? That's interesting. That's interesting. It's almost as though, this is interesting. It's almost saying as though I don't know why this is coming through now, but it's like your passions in the like when you're pursuing these passions in the physical reality, because this is coming through the red with the root chakra, which is very connected to the element of earth and the physical plane, right? Pursuing these kind of passions that are in alignment with your heart space move you in the direction of your spiritual journey and bring you a certain sense of peace, right? With rest here and trust. Because when I see those eyes closed there, that's ultimate trust. That's going within, and that's not trying to push anything to happen either. Okay? The way of the ego, eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. So already we're seeing here how the ego allows us to tap into these energies, because the ego is essentially your understanding of self, your identity, right? That's interesting. Okay. I'm going to ask through Pamela's deck now. I was prompted to pull 3 tarot decks for this reading, so I'm interested to see what's going to come out here. I have never been prompted in that way before, but we going with it. That's what we doing. Yeah. I'm being reminded by my spirit guide that this is also connected to play. Being playful, the inner child, and he's actually reminding me that that inner fire is the inner child, right? Your spirit. The spirit of a child is what I'm hearing. Seven of Cups popping out here. Okay, this is interesting. Okay. So I'm being told this is your ego, and these are the options that you have on your journey when you set out in front of you. And the ego, being connected to passion, to rest, to movement, helps you in the discernment around these things that you, and this is interesting because it's emotional. So we've got, that's really interesting. Okay. That is something to meditate on. So okay, this is the Seven of Cups, right? The seven is the number of going deeper. The seven is also the number of balancing the intuition with the intellect, with thinking, okay? What I'm getting here, though, is that it's the emotional experiences we go through, the tumultuous emotional experiences we go through that happen through the ego in order for us to get to a place where we go deeper with the number seven into balancing our intellect with our intuition. This is connected to our thoughts, creating our reality as well, like what thoughts and what things we think, right? Coming out of an emotional kind of, experience happening through the ego to lead us to our thoughts and to our intuition. That's a lot. Okay. Let's see what's at the bottom of the deck. That's a lot to meditate on. We have the Ace of Swords. That's Archangel Michael coming through to me here. And this is also about a new way of thinking. A new way of thinking. This is also divine intervention, right? Yeah. It's almost like with Archangel Michael and this particular card coming through, it's also saying here that your ego, in a sense, served you in terms of protecting you in certain ways. And that's, again, part of the spiritual journey, is understanding that at some point you no longer need the protection of the ego if it continues to stunt your spiritual growth, right? If it continues to bring you down. There's a lot of that currently with the energies that are going on right now, that are completely ripping people out of old ways of thinking, right? Out of these sort of old kind of emotional, more kind of dysfunctional ways of being emotionally through the ego. But they're continuing to reiterate to me that it's all part of the process. Like, we cannot vilify the ego. We can't do that. It's just we have to better understand it. That's what I'm hearing. Like, we have to better understand it. Okay, so asking through the Mystic Mondays deck now. Let's see what comes out here. Eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. Like, eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. Yeah, I'm hearing that's holding us back. Okay. Look at that. Four of Pentacles. That's, oh my God. Ace of Pentacles. Holy shit. I'm just like, anyway. Queen of Pentacles. Whoa. Okay, so you know what's really crazy about all of these is I keep on coming back to the heart space for some reason. I keep on coming back. The Four of Pentacles can indicate a blockage at the heart space, okay? This is also about totally being in a comfort zone, not wanting to get out of it, thinking in a box, not outside of the box, okay? Physical reality So this is indicative now of the earth plane. Let's just look at it from that perspective first, because these are all just kind of coming through piece by piece. And then with the Ace of Pentacles coming in here, we got another divine intervention in the physical plane, in your what it is you're physically seeing around you, how you're perceiving the 3D, divine intervention in this respect as well. But again, it's coming through as the heart space for me. Craziness. And then we've got the Queen of Pentacles, and look at where she's holding that pentacle. This is interesting. So there's something here also being expressed with regard to the divine feminine and the I'm hearing the spiritual appropriation of the divine feminine. The spiritual appropriation of the divine feminine around the heart space, akin to this falsity. So what I'm getting here is that the falsity around the ego, the falsities around the ego are parallel to the falsities around the divine feminine in terms of spiritual growth and understanding and, spiritual, your journey, your spiritual journey, okay? And also how a lot of what has been said to be the divine feminine has been made out to be the ego. Oh, this goes back to the emotions. This is why this heart blockage thing is coming through. So this being emotional has always been an ego thing in terms of certain spiritual teachings and communities and religion. Religion keeps on coming through here. So this, oh man, this is about like, you have to understand that the emotional body is integral to your spiritual growth and understanding on the physical plane. This is why all pentacles are coming out here. We have a very specific experience being incarnated on Mama Gaia, Queen of Pentacles, okay? Absolutely. And there's temperance is underneath the deck here, which is about tempering these energies. And then we have the Three of Swords in reverse, okay? Like, and then the Devil in reverse. If I keep on going, like this is really about bringing back into balance that midpoint in that lemniscate, all of these concepts that have been warped. They've been completely warped in order to get back into your heart space and understanding that the emotional journey of the ego, so to speak, is integral for you busting out of this limited, rigid idea of spirituality for this beautiful divine intervention to take place in the physical, like physical transformation, almost to the point where it's like your heart itself goes through a transformation physically. And what that is translating to now is energetically part of the journey. And we've got two aces here, right? Ace of Swords and Ace of Pentacles, which is, again, divine intervention, new ways of thinking, new beginnings in your physical reality. And I'm asking now, finally, through the 1909 Tarot, which is really just another version of Pamela's deck, for understanding this idea of eradicating the ego. This is spiritual falsity. This concept of eradicating the ego, spiritual falsity. Yeah, this emotional thing, it goes right back to being connected to passion. Because that is an emotion, right? Okay. Oh, man. Okay, so we've got the Two of Wands here in reverse. All I'm hearing here is blockage of spirit. So in this card, right, you see the man. He's got one foot in his garden and the other foot is ready to venture out. He's holding the world in his hands. He's a visionary, okay? Vision coming from spirit, vision coming from inner fire. And he ain't moving out yet, okay? It's like he's stuck here in between. And you could almost equate this, right? Is two different kind of spiritual concepts, right? And not being able to move out, or ideas of the spirit, or things like that. You could almost equate it to that, right? And then we've got the Wheel of Fortune and the Four of Swords in reverse. Okay, this is really interesting. So you could almost kind of look at the Wheel of Fortune as destiny, right? Or karma in some respect. Whenever, you see it, you have to look at it in terms of, where are we at on this wheel? Where are we at? Where are you at on this wheel? Oh, that's what they're telling me to do right now. They want me to ask you that question. Where do you see yourself on this wheel? And these are indicative of the different ages spiritually. And this is what's coming specifically through for this message, okay? Elements of the divine feminine in here as well, coming through when I see the snake. That's how I interpret it for this particular reading. The Sphinx with the sword, going back to the Ace of Swords here, okay? Now, when it comes to the ego, eradicating the ego is a spiritual falsity. What I'm being drawn to is this kind of, I always kind of think of it like a jackal-like figure or whatever. So kind of like when we first, okay, so take this however it resonates, but sometimes people, when they start reading tarot or they first see tarot, and when this is connected a lot with how, again, we're indoctrinated, the way we see things, how we're programmed to see things, right? Coming from a place of fear, right? We see a card like the Tower card, or we see a card like the Death card, or we see this jackal-like figure right here, and we kind of go, oh, freaky, we're freaked out by it because we have associations. And I would even go as far as saying the snake too, okay? Which is another symbol of the divine feminine that has been vilified, especially through religion, especially, okay? So when we first see these things, right, we can be really put off by them. We can be really scared of them. They can really freak us out. They can trigger a lot of fear, right? But this Wheel of Fortune, what they're showing me, is indicative of that spiritual journey. And you can almost equate the ego to this jackal-like figure, or even the snake for that matter, like as divine feminine and divine masculine. Divine masculine, divine feminine, in their more kind of maybe quote-unquote dysfunctional states. But how all of this is necessary for the growth and the spiritual evolution that you signed up for. And baby, it's time to fucking bust out and start taking steps on this journey. You have everything you need. That sword at his back is his weapon. It's this Ace of Swords again. This sword that the Sphinx is holding here. That's your truth. That is your inner truth. Again, Archangel Michael coming through here. Your protection. Your inner truth is your protection. Your ego is a part of that process in order for you to now venture out on your spiritual journey. You're ready to do that. You're ready to do that. So it's really important. All I'm getting reiterated here right now, going back to this idea of the ego and the way of the ego, it's really important that you do not vilify the ego. Now, when I say that, I don't mean, oh, just be an asshole, egoic, like, oh, that guy's such an ego. By the way, very, very interesting thing to analyze. Why do we use that phrase? Where does that come from? That could be another topic for another reading. Like when we say, oh, that guy has such an ego, egocentric. Why does that have such a negative connotation in this day and age? Why? Think about it for a moment. Why does ego mean selfish? Why? Perhaps, because this goes back to a lot of what's been going on now for people going through a spiritual awakening, where they're being told they're selfish because they're now truly tapping into who they are, right? The truth of who they are and speaking their truth, because it doesn't fit into a program anymore, because it doesn't fit into what your family said was good anymore. This is where discernment comes in, right? And this is where energy is the new currency is coming in as well, okay? There was one last thing that I wanted to add here, and I'm going to probably expand on this at some point. This is the first time I ever heard this come through. These awakened souls who are awakening, awakened souls already here on Mama Gaia, who are here to serve the ascension process and the expansion of consciousness, I heard referred to as the leaders of the Uranian age, okay? I wanted to put that in here, going back to what I was saying earlier about this whole idea of, well, I mean, it goes back to the ascension process and seeing the judgment card come up here and the chariot come through as well, okay? Paving a new way, being a leader. If you're here, if you're being called to do spiritual work right now with regard to the ascension process and the expansion of consciousness happening on Mama Gaia, you have to start referring to yourself and really thinking of yourself as a leader of the Uranian age in a way. And part of what that entails, and I've talked about this before, but a big part of what that entails is you taking concepts, ideas, especially around spirituality, and really tapping into your own inner truth, tapping into the universal truth and the universal laws at work, the real ones, the true ones, okay? And really taking these concepts that we've just sort of inherited, even concepts in the spiritual sense that we've inherited through whoever lens it was that said it, and religion that goes without saying, taking these concepts and really turning them on their head. And I mean, you're ready to do this. Like, here you go. Okay? If you're watching this reading right now, you're fucking ready to do this. And do not get discouraged when it comes to, you know, the emotions and the kind of experiences that you may be going through. They are all there to serve you. They're all there to serve you. The ego is here to serve you, okay? Thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear any kind of feedback you have on this, what you're going through right now. Please leave that in the comments below. And if this resonates for you, share it. If it resonates for anybody that you think might be needing to hear this, please share it as well. I'm sending you so much love wherever you are.